Hi everybody, happy Friday to you, and welcome once again to What's It To Ya with Carter and Jack. We've got a lot of great things to talk about on tonight's show. The Columbia High School boys basketball team fell on a tight one to Seton Hall Prep in the county semifinals. We'll talk about what the Cougars can do looking ahead to be competitive in the state tournament come March. In baseball, Robinson Cano was criticized by Yankee hitting coach Kevin Long recently for not hustling down to first base. Jack and I disagree about whether or not that's really a big issue. The All-Star game in NBA news is now in the books. We'll talk about what we thought of the dunk contest, the game itself, and those uniforms. Plus, in the debate of the week, what's the best rivalry in North American sports? Plus, Jack's got a parting shot about what's really annoying him about these Winter Olympic Games. What's It To Ya starts right now. And welcome again to this latest edition of What's It To Ya. I am Carter Woodiel, and he is Jack Worth. In a minute, we'll talk about whether or not the signing of Ubaldo Jimenez is a good move for the Orioles, but we're going to start on the basketball court, the high school basketball court. The Columbia High School boys team fell, as I said earlier, to the Seton Hall Prep Pirates in the county semis by a final score of 49-43. They were competitive throughout the game, but couldn't quite get the upper hand on the Prep. The state tournament starts in March, Jack. What do the Cougars need to do to become competitive, to compete with these top teams like Prep and like Eastside?
And, you know, it's important that you'd say it to compete with these top teams, because what Columbia does really well throughout the season is that they've won all the games they're supposed to.
Yep.
If you look at their record against teams from New Jersey playing in-state, they're 15-5. 4 of those 5 losses came to Seton Hall Prep and Newark Eastside, the 2 best teams they've played. So they've gone 15-1 against second, third tier competition, which is great in the first 2 rounds when they're going to play North Hunterdon and then Bridgewater Raritan. But when you move on to teams like Linden's, top 10 state ranked, Patterson Eastside, again, another top 10 state team, they have to start finding a way to beat these upper echelon teams in New Jersey. And you look at the roster, the most immediate issue is that there's so little size with this team. They always get out-rebounded. Kelly Hogan, the junior forward for Seton Hall Prep, recorded 7 blocks in the paint
and 17 boards
in the semifinals.
I mean, yeah, and that is a big issue. You know, these players aren't going to get taller at the moment. We were talking about it when we were watching the game on Saturday night, how they were getting pushed around a bit on the inside. Another thing that I think can be improved upon here is the offensive efficiency. Because I think when Columbia has all of its cylinders clicking, especially when both Runcie brothers are clicking, it's a very tough team to beat. But we saw an example of it not going as well against Seton Hall Prep. Mike Runcie put up 23 points. That's a game high. He had a great game. But older brother David put up just 2, not his best night. It seems like Columbia needs to have both of those guys going well if they're going to be a top-tier competitor.
And it does. And when you look at David, who's actually the top scorer on the team, in games against Seton Hall Prep, he just scored 2. In the last time against Seton Hall Prep, just 4 points. So David is sort of the kind of player who needs others to create his shot for him, which, when you're playing against a team you're superior to, works so well. They have Robert Gordon and Mike Runcie to create. The defense starts to collapse. They kick out to David, who hits a 3-pointer. But what we saw against Seton Hall Prep twice now, the Cougars' 3 lowest scoring games, once against Eastside, twice against Seton Hall Prep. Their offense in the half court, when matched up with players who can lock them down one-on-one, starts to get stagnant. They don't attack the rim, which they do so well when they're playing against, when they have the upper hand in that one-on-one matchup.
And when they can diversify their offense, you feel like the team is playing better. You know, and there were little portions in the game against Seton Hall where they were getting inside, getting to the foul line, and then opening up the defense a little bit. But it seemed like they couldn't keep that going for the entire game, especially late in the fourth quarter when Seton Hall Prep kind of put the game away.
And that can happen in a tight game when they're not going to be able to score on the fast break, which they do very well.
And that's absolutely true. We'll be seeing what they do come the state tournament in March. Always a chance to improve. And this team, I think we agree, is very, very good when they play well. Let's move from the basketball court to the baseball diamonds, from high school to the pros, and the pros getting paid big money right here. Ubaldo Jimenez, one of the last remaining big starting pitchers on the free agent market, has inked a deal. At the time of our taping, it's pending a physical with the Baltimore Orioles. The contract says he's going to be paid $48 million roughly over a 4-year contract. Ubaldo Jimenez was 13-9 with a 3.3 ERA for the Cleveland Indians last year. Do you like this move, Jack?
I really do, actually. I mean, I think you're going to disagree with me, but a couple weeks I was looking at the Orioles and I'm thinking they play in probably the toughest division in baseball. They had a really surprisingly strong year 2 years ago. They regressed a little bit this year, and it looked like they weren't doing anything, and I was confused by the fact that they're just going to sort of sit there and watch the Yankees get better, watch the Rays continue to be a good baseball team, and watch the Red Sox win the World Series. And if they're just going to settle for, okay, we'll compete for third or fourth place, but here they go out there and they sign a good pitcher, which is really what they need.
But I think that if you're looking at this and you're seeing the money that's involved, it kind of, I understand that they need to make a big offseason move, but if you look at this objectively, you can't say this is a deal that's worth the money they're paying for Ubaldo Jimenez. Listen, the guy was lights out when he played for the Rockies back in 2010, but since then, his productivity has just steadily declined, and you can see it with his fastball velocity. In 2010, his average fastball was 96.1 miles per hour. Last season, that was down to 91.7. And I understand that Ubaldo Jimenez is a guy who has multiple pitches that he can turn to. He's a guy who can adjust. But he's not going to be, I don't think, a pitcher that's worth a deal this big. Objectively, if you're just looking at the contract, it's not worth it.
Well, we've come to the point in baseball where, I mean, if you're going to take the $48 million, use his WAR from the next 4 years and divide it, will it be worth the $48 million? No, but you can say that for 95% of the signings in the Major League Baseball free agency. That's just what we've come to. You have to sort of ignore the price tag, which for the Orioles is not a huge issue because their salary was so low going into this. They have money to spend. Mm-hmm. They're not fighting against the cap because their payroll's not very high to begin with. They can afford to throw a couple million around. And let's look at his stats, not his fastball velocity, just throwing 92 miles per hour on his fastball, just a hair below that in 2013. He still struck out 194 batters.
His ERA walked 80 of them.
His ERA was 3.3, which is low. That's what you want.
Okay.
I don't think he deserves the bill as just that guy who 5 years ago had that one great season and has sort of come back to earth.
Well,
I think
that fits. All right, he's still a good pitcher. I don't think he's worth all that money, but if I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to any GM in baseball, it's going to be Dan Duquette in Baltimore. Maybe he sees something that I don't, and we'll see if this signing works out. Sticking with baseball, we're going to talk a little bit about Robinson Cano, who signed, as I'm sure you know, the big mega deal with the Seattle Mariners. Used to play for the Yankees, and the Yankees hitting coach Kevin Long had some choice words for him that he told the Daily News on Sunday. He said, even if you run at 80%, no one's going to say anything, but when you jog down the line, even if it doesn't come into play 98% of the time, it creates a perception. Basically, what Kevin Long is saying is, if you're Robinson Cano and you are blatantly not hustling, that's a problem. Lloyd McClendon, the manager of the Mariners, fired right back at Kevin Long. You're shaking your head. What's up?
First, let's ignore what he says for right now, because
ignore what he says.
Okay, let's ignore the content of the quote for 1 minute and just say, why is Kevin Long talking about another player?
Because Kevin Long is a hitting coach that spent years with Robinson Cano. He's not just any hitting coach. He's a very good hitting coach.
The fact that it's coming from Kevin Long and not Joe Girardi, Hal Steinbrenner, or Brian Cashman.
Hal Steinbrenner?
Let's talk about the three most...
Kevin Long is far more qualified to talk about the performance of a Yankee on the field than Hal Steinbrenner.
I'm talking about the three most important Yankees coaches and executives in terms of talking to the media. There's a reason they didn't say this, because they know that it's not called for. Girardi didn't say this because he realizes it's a non-issue. He doesn't play for his team. Kevin Long is upset that Robinson Cano, his best hitter, has just left the Yankees.
No,
and now
this is not Kevin Long being angry about his best hitter leaving for another team.
This is totally Kevin Long.
That's not what this is. This is Kevin Long saying this is a problem that Robinson Cano has. Maybe he wasn't able to talk about this issue that he had because he wouldn't want to throw one of his own players under the bus. But this is something important. You watch Robinson Cano. For one, he's a terrible base runner in general. By far the weakest point of Robinson Cano's game is his base running. And to see a guy not hustle, I know Robinson Cano's a great player, But you can't think that you're above hustling down the line because there are cases where you might get an extra hit out of it. You really might.
But who cares? He's so good. He's the best hitting second baseman. And
But the issue makes sense. I'm not saying that, like, if you're the average baseball fan, you look at Robinson Cano and say, well, I don't like him because he doesn't hustle. But if Kevin Long says Robinson Cano chose not to hustle and I don't think that's a good idea, why is that a bad thing?
But here's the real... Robinson Cano is the best hitting second baseman in baseball. Now, Kevin Long is throwing out these numbers where he's got to run 80%, 98% of the time. Right now, he's only running 60%. What does that even mean?
It means that he's blatantly not
Robinson
hustling.
Cano is jogging down the first base line when he grounds out to second base. The real story is Robinson Cano probably jogs down to first base when he grounds out to the infield less than most baseball players because usually his hits don't result in infield ground balls.
Okay, well,
he gets base hits, which is what matters. Derek Jeter runs down the line 80% of the time and doesn't get on base much.
If I'm a coach, I'm telling you to hustle down the first base line.
And if I'm Lloyd McClendon with my new favorite toy, Robinson Cano, he can jog all he wants. And I know you can say no one's bigger than the team, but you know what? That's not true.
Agree or disagree. I really feel like this is something you have to tell all of your players, but we'll see. Social media question of the week. It's now time for that. Let's go to Facebook. Our question this week comes from Eli, and it's short and sweet. He asks, did NBC's interview of Bodie Miller go too far? A little background on the question. Bodie Miller is an alpine skier. He's an American. He's been retired, but he came out of the retirement to play in the Olympics. No one was really sure how well he would do, and he turned in a great performance in the Super G, wound up tying for bronze. That's enough to make a great storyline, isn't it? Well, NBC, in its interview with Bodie Miller after the race, they asked him about his brother, who had died of a seizure following injuries that had been sustained in a dirt bike accident. He died, I believe it was 5 or 6 months ago. They asked him a question about it. He struggled through an answer. And they asked him another question about it, and he could hardly even speak. And they asked him another question about it, and he collapsed in tears. The question is, should they have just held off?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it creates the point where it's not about the competition at all anymore. After one question, and then especially after 2 questions, it's like, what does this have to do with Bodie Miller, the skier? Mm-hmm. And at what point does it just become NBC looking for that personal story because it's going to get headlines more than Bodie Miller, the skier was?
They put a mic on his wife, for God's sake.
Which I saw before I knew about the history with his whole family, and I just thought was really strange.
He has 2 children from 2 separate relationships, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and neither of them are from the relationship with his wife. But let's just go back to the interview. I think that it crosses a line because as much as they're athletes and it is their job to help the media do their job, what they were asking Bodie Miller doesn't have anything to do with, the real story, which of the Olympics is Bodie Miller being the skier. And there is a line that says, although they're open to you, there's a respect line that you don't cross because that's just it's unnecessary. They should have known. They should have used better judgment and realized that was off limits.
And to his enormous credit, Bodie Miller took the high road on this one. He said, he tweeted about it. He said, in essence, I understand what they were doing. It was a heat of the moment thing. I don't have any grudge against NBC. So you have to applaud Bodie Miller for not being annoyed about this because I don't know if I would react the same way, publicly at least, as Bodie Miller did. We're going to head to our one and only break. When we come back, we're giving grades on what we thought of the NBA All-Star Game, the debate of the week, what's the best rivalry in sports, and Jack's parting shot. All ahead on What's It To You. Stay right there. I'm in the deep details with the world can never get me on my...
Slow down.
Slow down and move over.
And move over.
When you see lights, vests,
or reflectors.
Please, give us some room. Slow down and move over.
When you need us,
we've got your back.
Do you have ours?
You got our back?
You got ours? You got our back? Please, slow down.
And move over.
My songs know what you did in the dark. Hi everyone, welcome back to What's It To Ya. We're going to move now to basketball. And we're going to start with the NBA All-Star Game. We're going to give grades, hand out a report card, if you will, on what exactly we thought of some particular aspects of All-Star Weekend. We're going to start with the dunk contest. We talked about this last week on the show when Bobby was here, Jack. I'm glad you're out of your Sochi bathroom. We talked about how there's a new format for the dunk contest. Not your typical format, East versus West, a freestyle round, and then a battle round. How would you grade the dunk contest for 2014?
Well, like you said, there is a freestyle round and a battle round, so I'm going to split my grading. I'm going to grade the freestyle round and then the battle round separately. Freestyle round earned a solid D, I have to say. The battle round, however, really impressed me. I'm going to give the battle round an A-, although it was short. But I thought
too short.
It was too short, which sort of exposes the flaw. But the dunks were the A-. I think it's something that in a couple years the NBA can get right going forward. Let's start with the freestyle round, which was just kind of like pointless.
Yeah, I mean the freestyle round, the issue was there were so many dunks going on at once that there wasn't build-up. You know, and when you're building up to a dunk, then and when it actually happens, because it's like the thing about a dunk is, you watch a dunk, it's great. But what really makes the dunk memorable is how the crowd reacts to it. And if you don't have a huge crowd reaction to a dunk, then it's not going to be all that good. And I disagree with you with the battle round. I give the dunk contest as a whole a C-, because it just feels like, you know, this is like when the teacher hands you a report card and saying, young man, you're working below your potential, because that's what I think they were doing here. They had the battle round, the East won handily, and now you've got 3 guys on the East, and that's it. They win as a team. They give John Wall Dunker of the Night. Why not have him prove it? Why not have those 3 guys compete for the best dunker in the group? It seemed like that's what they absolutely should do next. And the fact that they left that off is, I mean,
I agree entirely.
I want to move now to the actual game. It was high scoring. They set a record for both most points by one team, which was set by the East, and for the combined scores. The East wound up winning. Kyrie Irving named the MVP. What's your grade for the game?
The game, unlike most years, I think this was a year where the game actually was the best part of All-Star Weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree
this
with
was
you.
a quality battle. I'm going to give this game a B+. I think, unlike the dunk contest, I want the game to be competitive. I understand
Yes.
the players think this is fun, but this is a game that should be competitive because it is still a basketball game, and I think this game was competitive. I mean, LeBron set the tone very early in the first quarter, which is usually 4 hours before anyone starts playing defense. LeBron recorded a steal, hustled down to the offense, and dunked it home and sent a message to the West that this is going to be a real basketball game.
Yeah, and that's what's really impressive. Usually when you watch the All-Star game, it's like, okay, well, when we get to the fourth quarter, a real game will probably break out. With this one, you kind of felt like it was competitive all the way through. And when you got to the fourth quarter, it was entertaining. I agree with you. I give this a solid B+. I say relative to the other All-Star games of the past, this is a big improvement. Let's move now to the uniforms they were wearing. I'll let you go first. Give your grade on these new uniforms that the East and West were wearing during the All-Star game.
I was a little bit impressed with the uniforms. I saw them leaked 2 weeks ago and thought they were absolutely hideous. And then once I saw them on the court, I kind of liked them, especially for an All-Star game feel where it's not a real basketball game. I'm gonna give them a C-. I like the uniforms. Okay, sorry, I don't like the uniforms. I didn't hate the uniforms.
My opinion is completely the opposite from you. It was really interesting. When I looked up pictures of the All-Star Game uniforms, I saw them like, okay, you know, they got the East and the West. They got the rosary on the front because it's in New Orleans. I get it. And then when I actually saw them play on the court, I was like, this is garbage. Okay, these uniforms were garbage. I'm giving them an F-, because when I'm looking at this, I can't even read the font on the front of the jersey. The thing is like this big, when the player's moving around, all I see is the big splotch of rosary, which is almost impossible to read on the, it's like red on red on the West uniform. Can't tell which team is which. The sleeves go down like here. Sleeved NBA uniforms don't look good on NBA players. They look good on the average Joe from Brooklyn who's buying a shirt, which is why they still exist. But on an NBA player, they don't look any good. And I just felt like these uniforms were just a total and complete disaster.
I mean, I know this is totally the point that you're making against, but I think the uniforms weren't bad enough that they distracted me from the game. Which is exactly what you're saying.
Completely disagree.
They are.
I'm saying they distracted me from the game. I mean, they didn't distract me from the game for the entire time.
Yeah.
But when I turned on the TV to watch the All-Star game, I was like, okay, what is going on here with these uniforms? These are not real uniforms. Terrible. And now it's time for our debates of the week, now that we're in such a good humor. It's about rivalries. Last night, Duke and Carolina faced off in what is considered the best rivalry in college basketball. It's really on the top of those, but the question of whether or not it's the best rivalry in all of North American sport is a big question. It's a question, but I think the answer is yes. I think Duke Carolina is above everything else, but Jack, you disagree with me. Why?
I do, and I disagree, and I go with the classic professional baseball rivalry, the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox.
Okay.
And the first and foremost argument is that these two teams dominate the American League in an unprecedented way. I know Duke and Carolina dominate the ACC, but when we talk about national scale, the ACC just a smaller conference. And I know
no, it's not.
It's a smaller conference in relative to the entire country.
Okay, all right. It's made up of less teams.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But it's you could make the argument today that the ACC is the AL East of college basketball.
But for the 80 years preceding, it wasn't. I'm just
Okay.
saying the American League champion.
Talking about today, though.
The American League champion has more influence on the overall champion than the ACC champion.
Yes. Okay.
So the
I'll give
Yankees
you
and
that,
Red Sox
but-
combining for 57 American League pennants. There have only been 110.
Okay.
So now,
it's hard to take those numbers like that in pro sports and put them up against college sports because there are so many more teams in college sports, especially in basketball.
College sports. Your next argument is where college sports is you can't compare either. So I'm gonna wait for that. But no, I think Yankees Red Sox because when we talk about professional sports, especially baseball, which you don't see the passionate fans jumping up and down and screaming like in college basketball, there is so much passion, and the baseball between the two cities. Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees. That's
okay. But the thing is, to me, and I'm not saying that Boston and New York isn't a great rivalry, not just with teams, but with cities. It definitely is. But here's the difference. If you're talking about cities, if you're talking about how the fans interact, Duke and Carolina are 8 miles apart. Everybody knows that. 8 or 9, give or take. But it seems like people don't understand just how. At this time last year, Nicholas Schwartz, the guy named Nicholas Schwartz, put up a great article on BuzzFeed just talking about exactly this. There are people who live in Durham, where Duke is, and work in Chapel Hill, where North Carolina is. There are people who do the opposite of that. There are people who take classes in one university and then afternoon classes in the other university. You cannot be a part of this rivalry without seeing it every single day. If you are a Yankee fan, chances are you're living in Jersey, you're living in New York, you're surrounded by other Yankee fans. If you're a Duke Carolina fan, the other team and that rivalry is constantly in your face, always.
Well, yes, but the thing is that with the Yankees and the Red Sox, it's this culture of this is what matters. The baseball shuts down when the Yankees play the Red Sox because it's the biggest thing in baseball.
That's not true.
The Yankees and Red Sox
play 18 or 19. The Yankees and Red Sox play 18 or 19 games a year.
Every single one is on ESPN.
Okay.
Because it's the biggest story in baseball.
But the baseball world does not stop when the Yankees and Red Sox play each other every single time.
The baseball world revolves around the Yankees and Red Sox.
Okay, well that's because they're the two most high-profile teams. You can say the same thing about Duke
and
Carolina.
North Carolina aren't the most high-profile teams, though.
They're pretty darn close.
They're near the top, but
they're pretty darn close.
But they're not 1 and 2, which is what the Yankees and Red Sox are. They're number 1 and number 2. They are the two highest-profile teams in baseball.
But you can't say Duke and Carolina play twice a year, maybe 3 times, okay? And that's something that the Yankees and Red Sox don't have. If you play 18 or 19 games a season, it can become routine. It can become boring. And I know that because it's basketball, there's more action to begin with. But the Duke Carolina games, this is in the BuzzFeed article as well, never boring. But ever. I guarantee you, this is airing on Friday. We taped this on Tuesday. The game was on Thursday between Duke and Carolina. I will guarantee that I will look and watch this on Friday, and the game against Duke and North Carolina will not be boring. It was not a boring game. I can tell you that, even though it hasn't happened yet.
But that's nature of college basketball versus pro baseball. Pro baseball, you're going to play each other 18 times a year.
And it makes it a better rivalry because they're in a sport that's better for rivalries.
But when we're talking about neutral factors, I want to throw out variables like the college basketball they're going to play less times. Baseball, like you mentioned before, each sport brings with it different outside variables, but the rivalry between the Yankees and Red Sox is just bigger than Duke and Carolina.
Because
people outside of North Carolina don't care as much as people outside of the Northeast care about Yankees Red Sox, and that's what it is.
I don't think that's true, and I don't think it matters. I don't really think. I think if you're talking about a great sports rivalry, I'm talking about how the diehard fans interact. And here's another thing: Yankees-Red Sox. If you want to talk about some of the best Yankees-Red Sox games that have ever happened, you're gonna look at the postseason. This is a rivalry that has been helped a lot by great postseason moments. You want to know the number of times Duke and North Carolina have played each other in the NCAA tournament?
How many?
0 times. Not one. And it's still in this conversation. That tells you about how great of a rivalry this is. That every single game can throw students and fans into a mania, and they've never met in the postseason.
You just proved my point twice. I'll start with the first time. It shouldn't. It should be about what the people outside of the rivalry think. Because if you're inside the rivalry, you always think your rivalry is the best. People from Auburn and Alabama go crazy when
that's
Auburn
not how
and
you
Alabama
compare.
play.
But that's not how
People
you
from
compare
North-
rivalries.
People in Los Angeles go crazy when USC and UCLA plays. It's about the national spectrum. And
No, it's not.
Yankees Red Sox compete in the postseason, which is why it's better. I'd rather see them play with the American League pennant on the line instead of either an ACC regular season game or at best an ACC championship.
You're right, but if I'm watching a Duke Carolina game, I'm still more entertained.
But you're a Duke fan.
No, but you're a Yankee fan.
Okay, but
Okay, well, listen. I'm sure the Duke Carolina game was great. I had a ton of fun watching it last night, even though I haven't watched it yet because it's only Tuesday when we're taping this. But I think Carolina Duke is the best rivalry, and I don't think it's going away. I think Yankees Red Sox they had the heyday in 2003, 2004 in that area, and it's kind of dropping a little bit in terms of the intensity. That isn't happening with UNC Duke. So we'll see what happens with that. Jack, I know you've got a parting shot. We're running out of time. Let's hear it.
I mean, I want to talk about something that was stated really nonchalantly in an ice dancing broadcast a couple days ago during the Olympics
Good to see you're
coverage.
keeping track of that, yeah?
It was sort of thrown around that teams like at the top, like a Merrill Davis and Charlie White, a Scott Moore and Tessa Virtue, their mistakes will be overlooked by the judges because the judges, they say, well, these are gold medal contenders. We know they're great skaters. Where skaters that go early, non-medal contenders, are scrutinized so much closer because the judges have these preconceived notions, which are true, that the dancing isn't up to quality. So they're being scrutinized far more heavily than the teams competing for gold. Whether that affects the outcome of the gold medal is sort of not the issue. My point is that a Winter Olympics medal shouldn't really be decided by something that's so subjective. I mean, I think sports are two players or two teams going head to head and see which one comes out on top, whether it's which one finishes first or which one scores more points. I really have a hard time getting behind the idea that the judges can really just come in with these preconceived notions and have that play out on the ice or on the field. That's my opinion. I don't know. People love ice dancing. They'll continue to love ice dancing. That's our show for this week.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. Everybody, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure to keep blowing up our Facebook page for more questions for us to talk about on the air. We'll be back same bat time, same bat channel 1 week from tonight. So long.